Live from Chicago, this is Paul Lisnick with our Beyond the Beltway analysis of national politics, featuring occasional injections of rumor and innuendo, all offered up by our panel of political insiders, pundits, power brokers, public servants, professors, and most importantly, plain-speaking Americans from coast to coast. Tonight, featuring commentary by Philip Beverly, the director of the President's Award Program and Assistant Vice Provost at the University of Illinois at Chicago. Professor Ben Epstein, Associate Professor of Political Science at DePaul University, focusing on American politics, political communication, media, and politics, and American political culture. Stephanie Hitt, former attorney and division counsel for IBM Corporation, a Republican activist and convention delegate. And Michael Miller, Associate Professor of Economics and Associate Dean for Quality and Compliance at DePaul University. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Beyond the Beltway. Again, I'm Paul Lisnick, in for Bruce this evening. A Happy New Year to you all coming up. I am the political analyst over at WGN TV, so politics is the world that I live in, but I also like asking questions to people. Tonight, we're doing a year in review. We're going to take a look back at 2019. And candidly, I've asked this panel to join me tonight specifically because they're all pretty reasonable people. And I wanted to take a look back at the year we've had so that we can get a sort of a perspective on what the year has been. Towards the end of our second hour, by the way, we're going to take a perspective and look at what next year might look like and all the issues that are going on. You are always welcome to join the conversation as well. Our phone number is 1-800-723-8289. We love your calls from all over the country. All right, let me once again introduce our guest to you. Sitting on my left is Professor Ben Epstein. He is, as I said, Associate Professor of Political Science at DePaul University. He focuses on American politics, political communication, media politics, American political culture, and a great new book. Ben?
Yeah.
The title is?
The Only Constant is Change.
Yeah,
came out last year. Yeah, thank you so much.
Very true. Sitting next to you is Philip Beverly. He's the director of the President's Award Program and Assistant Vice Provost at University of Illinois at Chicago. Congratulations on that new world.
Thank you very much.
You, of course, are very familiar to many people for your many years as Associate Professor over at Chicago State University. Good to see you here tonight.
Thanks, Paul.
Stephanie Hitt is a former attorney and division counsel for IBM Corporation, Republican activist, convention delegate. We won't say which convention. And
But they're good parties.
Right, exactly.
Anything to party.
And a regular returning tonight as well, Professor Michael Miller, Associate Professor of Economics. We need you for that tonight, Michael.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Associate Dean for Quality and Compliance, DePaul University. Your job is to make sure I'm in compliance with all of the Bruce DuMont rules.
Right, lots of reports.
All right. So on this, yeah, you do that, right? It's always a report
do
time.
that. Yeah.
So listen, in our first segment tonight, we're going to have different topics in each segment because we've got to look back at the year. And I wanted to talk about what I think one of the biggest stories of the year is. It was the Mueller report and the ongoing impeachment process that has taken its way through the year and will be a 2020 topic. Let's go around and get a sense of this. Ben Epstein, you know, a lot of people say the Mueller report, it was a dud. So Democrats, they just got to figure out a way to get rid of this president. They moved on to something else. Is that what this is about? They've been trying to, as Republicans often say, they've been trying to undo the election of 2016 for 3 years now.
Well, I don't think that that's accurate. I think that if you were trying to undo that election through impeachment or through some other means, you would have started that much earlier, right? The idea that Nancy Pelosi, as the leader of House Democrats, was very reluctant to really move forward with impeachment until really a large group of moderate members of her party pushed forward, suggests that really was not the plan all the way along. And also it brings huge political risks really to everyone involved, to Trump as president, obviously, but also to Democrats moving forward. I think that there were big risks the last time there was an impeachment, and I don't think that Pelosi and other Democrats really thought this was an absolute way to move forward. They would have started much earlier if that was really, I think, the action.
So, Professor Philip Beverly, one of the things that the Democrats did do, they could have had a million charges in their impeachment articles if they wanted to. They had two. And it was all about obstructing Congress, not even obstructing justice, but obstructing Congress. And, of course, the famous phone call that gets in the way as well. Did the Democrats make a mistake by not having 4, 5, 6 articles? You know, in the Bill Clinton days, there were 4 articles, and, you know, Congress dumped 2 of them.
I think if we look at what their objective is, and and nobody wants to really talk about this, but I think that they were sort of backed into needing to follow this path so that they don't, in the long term, not just this Congress with this party, but in the long term, lose credibility as a co-equal branch of government. They have to hold this president accountable. The president's party isn't obviously going to do that, just like if it was a Democratic president, the Democratic Party is not going to hold that president accountable. So let's understand that that's the reality, the political reality, but that Congress has to maintain its viability as a co-equal branch of government. The easiest way to do that in my mind was simplicity. 2 articles, cut and dry, not a lot of nuance to it. The facts are the facts. The phone call is admitted to by the president and by Mulvaney. They haven't turned over documents that have been subpoenaed. That is obstruction. And that on that part alone, that's what tells me that this is really about we have to remain viable. It's not about getting them out.
So, Stephanie, Michael, I know you're chomping at the bit to chime in on this, but Stephanie, I want to give you a focus here initially, which is, these articles get created, and again, they could have gone in so many different directions, and they didn't. But the president clearly has said he's not going to be complying. No subpoenas, no documents, no nothing. No president in history has been that obstructive.
Right, but he's also, no president in history has been this harassed as well. Let's dial it back a little bit. They've been trying to impeach this guy since he was elected. Nancy Pelosi, maybe it was a slip, said, we didn't rush this. I've been trying to do this for 22 months. I mean, Nancy admitted to that. So they've been trying to do it. What I find is interesting is sort of what you started with, and that is, was the Mueller report kind of a dud? And in a way, the Mueller report was kind of one of these split the baby kind of reports, and did not find collusion and didn't really make a decision about obstruction issues. In this impeachment based on the Ukraine call, there wasn't anything thrown in there that they could have used from the Mueller report, which makes us all wonder, do they just not care? They're just looking for a shark in the water and they found the one, but at the end of the day, their desperation in trying to find something that they can grab onto. I think they sensed that America was tired of 2 years of Mueller report. They weren't going to retread these obstruction issues, so now they found something new, and they went after it. And so I don't know that it was necessarily a simplicity. It was more like, well, where's the blood in the water?
Well, and Professor Michael Miller, look, let me ask you, if the Democrats are handling it the way Stephanie says, Mitch McConnell has said he's working in lockstep with the White House. Mm-hmm. They do need to take an oath to be fair and impartial in this procedure. Is that fair?
Chuck
well, and the Democrats would
Schumer,
the Democrats would be wrong too, but shouldn't every senator basically step in and say,
but
we are going to listen?
Jury. It's a political process. It's not a jury. And let's remember, we started at the Mueller report. Throughout that entire time that he was investigating, I didn't understand it seemed to me obvious that they were unable to come up with any information at all. So his finding was not surprising. What aggravated me was the second part of the Mueller report. One of these cases, like you would do you would go after somebody to try to find out if they did something wrong, and you found out, well, they did some things kind of on the edge, and then you make that all public. That's ridiculous.
We continue the conversation with Beyond the Beltway when we come back after these words.
A new exhibit from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Stay tuned. Rock on TV. Artifacts from the Jackson 5, Sonny and Cher, Elvis, Cyndi Lauper, ZZ Top, Eric Clapton, and more. Now at the Museum of Broadcast Communications, 360 North State Street, Chicago. From Bandstand to Gaga, let's rock on TV. For info and tickets, visit museum.tv.
Oh, hello. You know, these days, I'm often quoted as saying, you can't believe everything you read on the internet. People forget that I was the first technology president, using the telegraph, T-mails as I like to call them, to communicate with my generals. Well, today, we are fighting a cybersecurity war, and our best defense is for folks to follow some of these tips when they're online. If it seems too good to be true, it probably is. Hover your cursor over links to determine the true web address. Look for misspellings and poor grammar, which are warning signs of fraud. Be suspicious of emails requesting urgent action, and never give away sensitive personal information. With malware for none, with cyber protection for all. This is your humble servant, Abraham Lincoln.
Welcome back to Beyond the Beltway. I'm Paul Lisnick in for Bruce DuMont. Very Christmassy, very holiday time going on here in our year-end review on Beyond the Beltway. So we talked about impeachment. Let's put a little more focus in on the Mueller report itself. Because, Stephanie Hitt, some would argue that had Attorney General Bill Barr not come out and given his summary a month before the report came out, in which he said, nothing to see here, folks, we might be in a different world today.
Well, that is, but people say Bill Barr lied when he did that, but in a way, he did sort of precurse the fact that when people did come out and read the report, there wasn't the famous smoking gun. There wasn't any wild finding in there. And then Mueller, in his own testimony, really couldn't bring forward anything else, anything compelling that would just, revitalize or kickstart maybe for, that impeachment investigation or whatever. So I think in a way, I don't know that Bill Barr was quite that influential by saying there's nothing here. Everybody was looking for something there. But at the end of the day, it turned out there really wasn't much.
Now, I got to go to Ben Epstein on that, because you've written a book about communication and the power of media. We're going to talk about media later specifically, but you heard what Stephanie said. Bill Barr, he didn't impact that.
Well, I think that there was this 2-year investigation. People were waiting and waiting and waiting, and what they finally got was Bill Barr's nice summary, and they had that summary for almost a month, and people were ready for some sort of conclusion. I think a lot of people, as Stephanie said before, we're tired of this long wait, and there was this brief summary that had an answer, or said what Bill Barr interpreted as the findings, and then we received the redacted version, 400 some odd pages of something, and most people didn't read that. Most people were able to pull some of the highlights or read some of the highlights from news reports, and then they could go from there. But Bill Barr's summary was exactly that. It was a very small, very quick summary, and it was very effective, because that's what people were sitting with for 3 or 4 weeks. The news cycle moves much quicker than that.
Before we saw the 440 pages.
Absolutely.
By the way, for folks listening and watching us, you can join our conversation at 1-800-723-8289. We'd love to hear from you. Michael, the Mueller did find there was no collusion. He did find that.
Yes.
But he did find 10 instances of instruction. He just said he was powerless to do anything about it. But the president built it up as
But there was no
obstruction.
crime. See, that's the odd thing. I found that you almost ran that red light 7 times. You don't make that kind of thing public, but he made it public. The part of the report that was so damning. And the fact that...
Because without collusion, you can't have obstruction?
Right. I mean, well, without... His job was to find, was there Russian collusion with the Trump administration? Not was there Russian interference. Of course there was. But the idea that you would then put out all this dirty laundry where you really don't have any proof, you just have all this innuendo. And the fact that it didn't become part of the impeachment, you talked about all these different directions they could have gone. Nonsense. I sat here on the, as a panelist many times over the past couple of years. It was going to be bribery. It was going to be emoluments. It was going to be the 25th Amendment. All of these things have come and they've gone, and they end up with 2 things which are not crimes.
Well, Philip, it goes back to what you were talking about, but you heard Michael. No crime, no obstruction.
Yeah, I would just want to remind us in the duration of the Mueller investigation, the number of indictments and convictions.
Completely unrelated, though, to the...
Tangential. They were all tangential.
As related to the Mueller investigation.
They were process crimes. They weren't necessarily related to actual collusion.
Involving some things which happened years before.
When I read the charge that the Attorney General at the time gave to Mueller to initiate it, the word collusion is never mentioned in that charge.
Because that's not a crime either, actually.
So they're not good. That there's no collusion is a red herring. And I wish we would just sort of admit that and say, okay, there's no collusion and there's no skipping down the lane either. What does that have to do with what was he was charged to investigate?
No.
He was charged to investigate specific instances. He found those things and said, I'm done here because I have to follow DOJ rules because I'm an employee of DOJ and I can't go beyond this point. But there's an entity that can go beyond this point, and that's Congress. So Congress, do your job, because I'm done.
Which they didn't, which is really surprising.
Which they didn't, or which they did?
Yeah, they did not.
Which they did, right? I mean, this is
Well-
I mean, that's he was essentially saying that because of this DOJ restriction, right? What Congress can do is take this a step further. Congress did do that, right? They did do that, but they didn't do that immediately, right? It suggests, and this goes
But
back
you're saying
to
you're talking about impeachment?
yeah, I am. I mean, that's
But
what,
none of the impeachment has to do with that
have
report.
anything to do with the
That's-
It has
findings
to
in
do
the
with
Mueller
obstruction
report.
of Congress,
That's
which is
The
nonsense.
articles are completely new and different. The Mueller report could never have happened, and they would still be,
And
whatever
so-
happened on the Ukrainian call. That's the basis. They did not. That's what I find surprising is they didn't use any of those hints of obstruction. None of the things that he
because there was
hinted at in
nothing
the second part.
Ben, probably a strategic
Yeah.
point by Nancy Pelosi, right? I think she
that's-
felt
that's
that
right.
had that didn't have any staying power.
there
with
was a
the
lot of
public.
there was a lot of
Gone, I
internal
think is what
debate
she
about
thought.
whether to do that, and the reason why Democrats chose not to was because it doesn't matter how many charges come up. It was much more politically effective to have a unified support passing two of these, and so it was a political calculus because, as Mike said, this is a political process.
It is, but
And it's
something
political theater.
Yeah.
And let's just acknowledge that.
But I have with me are two political science people and a lawyer, and I'm neither of those. So when I try to figure out something like impeachment, I turn to people I think I can trust, and people who protect civil liberties. Now you know where I may be going with it. It's Alan Dershowitz, and Dershowitz has convinced me. He and I disagreed on Clinton because there were crimes. He just said they weren't high enough to be
Right.
impeachment, but there were clearly crimes. He says there's no crimes here. And it has to be high crimes and misdemeanors. That's what I always thought. This idea that Gerald Ford said this is a political process, I think it was a horrible thing to say. You cannot overturn an election unless there are high crimes and misdemeanors.
Well,
and I'm
lawyers-
convinced that Dershowitz makes a very sound argument.
And Stephanie and I, as the lawyers in this group, would say
right, you're a
if you I am if you hire a lawyer, worse yet, I teach it. If you hire a lawyer, the truth is they can take whatever position that you want them to take. But let's involve some of the listeners who are watching us. We've got Alan. He's joining us from Chicago. He's listening on WCGO. And Alan, your belief, there's a critical issue here about checks and balances in the government.
Well, I just want to start with the Mueller report. I think was worth the effort because some facts did come to light. Like there were 250 contacts between the Trump campaign and the Russian operatives, 32 in-person meetings. There were 10 cases of obstruction of justice. So those matter. I think it's good to have two parties with a certain power because you can't have a rubber stamp government. If you have a rubber stamp government, you're just, might as well jump off a cliff somewhere.
It's called Russia,
Yeah, but
by the way.
And by the way, Alan, let me just ask you: I'm getting the sense of it that do you have a position as to whether the president has done what he's accused of doing, or is that really not? Is that an aside from your point?
Well, you're debating credibility here. You think there's a secret, somebody has a subordinate agenda, so therefore they manufacture facts to go after their enemy. And I think credibility is being on trial here, and you have to judge the source, because you got to judge what facts are just blown out of the air and what facts are real. And the facts of attacking democracy and the fact attacking people in power, well, of course you got to judge their credibility, but still, who's to say?
All right,
Who's
Alan.
to say who has credibility nowadays?
All right, Alan, thank you. I want to go to Stephanie for a response to that, but I need a lawyer response here because really one of the points Alan is making, when you look at the checks and balances, this will go to the Supreme Court. And we will have the Supreme Court rule actually in 2020 about whether the president has to turn over tax returns,
Tax
the whole issue of the
returns.
obstruction. All this stuff makes its way
Right.
to the courts. Forget about President Trump. What is your sense, knowing the way that you lean on this issue, of what this says about checks and balances going forward? Because if there was a Democratic president, and there will be one day, I don't think Republicans would be going, this works for me.
Well, it's interesting because when it does come to checks and balances, I think what a court should do is respect the authority that each section of the government has to protect their own information. So I think what we're going to see is that if an executive wants to claim executive privilege, that veil is not going to be pierced by another branch, equal branch.
But of course, the president hasn't claimed
He
executive
hasn't claimed
privilege.
that, but that's one of the issues that's going to be coming up with some of these witnesses and the tax documents. I mean, in doing that, they're going to look at the purpose for these. And this gets into a very jurisprudential question, and that is what we're seeing is a lot of these requests are not because there is something specific, a crime that they have found, and they're going and getting specific evidence. What they're doing is they're asking for these things so they can see if there is a crime. And from a very jurisprudential perspective, that is very troubling. I think a lot of people have a hard time with that, is why is one branch going into another branch when they don't even have specific reasons or specific information?
It's called oversight, right? That's what Congress says. They've got a duty.
That's exactly right. And not only is it oversight, but it's built in. I mean, if we go back to the framers, right? The James Madison, Federalist 10 talks about ambition will be used to counter ambition, right? The building in checks and balances as a way to not just to counter each branch, but to say that each branch is really going to, as Stephanie said, protect their own, right, and go after it. And so while the politics and the times change, this process was built in, and the definitions of high crimes, these have been debated and were unfortunately very vague, right? And so how they've been used and only been used a couple of times is really.
But I think,
Can you
I
explain
think we
something
can
to me
say
again as a non-expert here? There's something called the IRS. As far as I know, all of his tax returns have been accepted, right? And therefore, where's the issue?
But
Audited and done over and over.
There's a law that says that the Congress has
The
access
economy
to
is
that.
not working for everybody.
Yeah, it does.
Doesn't have access to everything.
It has access to his. It doesn't say in the law. And if I understand the
troubled by
Supreme
that.
Court's sort of precedent, they have to go by legislative intent.
It is true that they have to do that. We'll talk about what happens when we come back. You're watching Beyond the Beltway.
A line is a powerful thing. It connects the global economy to your living room, cleaner air to stronger markets, factory floors to less crowded roads, today's progress to tomorrow's promise. Norfolk Southern. One line, infinite possibilities.
Meet George Jetson. His boy Elroy.
With instant acceleration, electric cars are more fun to drive and more affordable than ever. Electric cars are here. Plug in to the present.
The economy is not working for everybody, especially those in jobs where unscrupulous businesses keep wages lower by hiring millions of illegal workers. Those businesses could use the government's E-Verify system to prevent illegal hiring, but they refuse. What's best for the country? Let businesses continue to hire illegal workers, or require E-Verify, raise wages, and recruit left-behind Americans? See what voters want at everifyworks.com. Paid for by Numbers USA, because numbers count.
Welcome back to Beyond the Beltway. We are having a year in review discussion. We're going to look ahead as well. I'm Paul Lisnick from WGN TV. Let me reintroduce my guest to you. Actually, I'll have you reintroduce yourself. Why not? Ben Epstein, you're a professor at DePaul. Tell us something fun about you.
Associate professor of political science. Been at DePaul for 8 years. Teach classes on media and politics and American political culture, racial and ethnic politics, and having a great time being here.
And we're going to talk about the media specifically as the show goes on. Philip Beverly, as I said, for many years we knew you as the guy who was a professor of poli-sci and many other things at Chicago State University, but you have since for many months now been wearing a new hat over at UIC. Congratulations. Talk about how fun that is.
My faculty colleagues think I've gone over to the dark side, being in administration. And the redeeming part of the job actually is I get to teach in the Honors College there, which is just a joy. The teaching is what I think keeps me sane.
And Stephanie, you graduated with honors, I'm sure. See, that was just a bridge over. Just to right.
That's right.
Miller's going, I could have said that. Anyway, so a former attorney with IBM and stuff, but obviously, even though you're a political activist on the Republican side, but you have to be informed. I guess as a lawyer myself, that has to inform you every time we have these conversations. You can't put that lawyer stuff aside.
No, you can't. In fact, I find my negotiation skills with 4 teenagers have really gone. I mean, let me tell you. But it's interesting because I don't often talk about this, but I started my legal career by working for Rudy Giuliani in the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Which, the next hour.
Which I was going to say, I have very interesting views on that. And but what I have found as an attorney, living in a very, very sort of liberal, as a conservative person, I've quite enjoyed these last few years being sort of a lone conservative voice and being willing to shake things up a little bit in my neighborhood. So that's the attorney in me.
Yeah. Has Rudy ever butt dialed you, by the way? I'm just curious.
No, but I do. Off the air, I have a funny story.
You see, we get to do stuff when you're not watching us, right? Michael Miller, I'm going to bridge our next topic with you because of your background, because I want to talk about the state of the economy in the United States. You are indeed a professor of economics, and but with a bit of a conservative bent to it. So, are there two sides to the economics issue?
No, I'm an economist first. The very first time I was on with Bruce, I called him and I said, I'm an economist first and I'm a Republican second. And he said, that's fine. That's exactly what I want to hear. So what I do is I go where the literature shows me. And I'm not a big fan of forecasting, for example, because forecasting we do it so poorly. It's such a chaotic.
You're not predicting recessions coming up or anything.
No, no one really can. So. And Philip has it exactly right. That I'm an administrator as well, but I get to teach, and teaching is a natural high. And teaching in the economic way of thinking happened to come from my discipline, which I adore. It is just it's a joy to go into class every day and to see, I hope, open minds to talk about it.
One thing, and we again remind our viewers and our listeners of our phone number, 800-723-8289. Be sure you call in. Numbers on your screen for those of you watching us live. And so let me come to you guys, because the economy is good, folks. It's very good. And many would say if the economy is good, no matter what else is going on, no matter what Democrats think, the president's in pretty good shape to be reelected.
It certainly helps. Unemployment rate is very low. Stock market is very high. The reality is that very relatively small numbers of people are invested in the stock market. That's not the economy, and so we can't point to that. It's a good indicator, right? It's a good indicator of a lot of things. But unemployment being low is really important too. Wages, though, are probably something that you want to think about along those lines, where they are, and they've been increasing, not increasing as high as some would like, and the amount of financial insecurity is still very, very high in the country. But many indicators for the economy have slowly continued to be very good for really the last decade. It's been a very slow, continual growth.
And Stephanie, Republicans used to care a lot about deficits, and with the blame it on what you want, tax cuts.
Not anymore.
Until George Bush.
Now.
And I think
let's just say that the tax cut, based on you correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, you're the economist, but apparently it has taken that's been one factor, taking our deficit to $2 trillion.
No, just under $1 trillion.
Just under $1 trillion. Well, the projections seem to be.
Oh, it could be.
Yeah.
But what matters is the percent of GDP, not the size of the number of dollars.
Okay. We're going to take your class tomorrow, but
that's right.
And the percentage of GDP of the deficit.
But the idea behind tax cuts
Republicans were always upset about that.
Well, and the idea behind tax cuts is that there is this idea. Now you correct me, but this general idea that. Although you're lowering the tax rate, you're increasing economic activity that is taxable, which in the end actually produces greater tax revenue.
That's the intention.
And that's the idea. And so that is that sort of Republican idea of that's how we handle the deficit. It's not that we're not we're taking away money that's going into the government, but we're actually increasing private economic taxable activity, which in the end it increases when you lower the taxes, and in the end there's just more of it. Even though we tax it less, there's so much more of it, it will bring in more money. And that's sort of the idea behind the deficits.
Is that what's happened?
Well, we have
also-
been increasing spending.
I mean, I just kind of...
There has been more
Increasing
revenue.
spending
We have
is
more
what-
of a spending problem than we have a
Yeah.
revenue problem. And part of the intention
Is
was
the
to
spending
increase
problem-
productivity by deepening capital expenditures. And that hasn't happened as much as we want, but it has occurred.
Is the spending problem partially a result of the amount of the budget that's dedicated toward interest on the debt?
No, that's actually because interest rates are so very low. It's Social Security and Medicare. That's what's going to kill us.
It is.
So I'm going to
The
switch topics, and I'm
entitlements,
going to stay
yeah.
with you on this, Philip, because the DACA decision comes down in 2020 from the Supreme Court. Immigration was President Trump's #1 issue at the beginning of his term. It's always remained there. The question is, and a lot of people angry about some of those decisions on the Democratic side, but the economy is good. So I'm not switching topics as much as I'm bridging topics. With a strong economy, if the Supreme Court gets rid of DACA, if they stand behind the president and the president's immigration policies continue to remain as tough and tight as they are, does that work for him or against him?
Wow. It's always going to work for him in his base. And I want to remind people that in 2016, 9 million more people voted against him than voted for him in the popular vote. Yes, I understand the Electoral College. I've been doing this a long time. I understand, the political science thing. And the thing is, 9 million more people voted against him. So in his base, immigration's always going to be, it's like an athlete that has a go-to move. That's going to be his go-to move. I get that. I would expect him to have a go-to, right? The challenge, though, is the economy going to be enough? Because I would expect whoever the Democrat who gets nominated by the party is probably going to sound really Reagan-esque, 1980. Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago?
Oh, you are.
And it won't be around the economics of better off.
Will you be better off, Michael, if I'm going to bridge healthcare into this as well, because the president who promises that we're going to have the greatest healthcare, best you've ever seen, but we haven't seen a plan from Republicans yet to replace Obamacare. And by the way, as the lawyer, and Stephanie knows, the Trump administration's argument before the courts are that pre-existing conditions should not be protected as part of the effort to get rid of. So how do we get?
That'll never fly.
Yeah.
That will be protected.
It's in the courts, but it's also my point.
It's
is
also a very hot
policy.
political
Right.
issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a hot political.
It certainly could cost the president. But I'm a little shocked or surprised by the DACA discussion. I'm in favor of DACA. I'm just not in favor of how it was done. It cannot be done through an executive order. It should be done through Congress passing laws. The president, whom I did not vote for, the president offered to make whole how many millions of people? All the DACAs, plus a whole bunch of others. Did the Democrats step up and say, okay, we'll give you some money for the wall? And so, no, they did nothing. This is not something that is squarely on the shoulders of
he
Trump.
has to cater to his base, the Democratic leadership has to cater to theirs.
Well, I'm part of the Republican base, and I'll
their
tell you, I'm a
base-
big fan of legal immigration. I just want to
And
control the
DACA,
border.
which
I
would have
know
been
many
that.
people who are fans of illegal immigration.
I don't
Where
know.
does that come from?
No,
And
it's
what
coming
have
from the
Democrats
Democratic
done
people running for
since March
president.
on DACA. They haven't done anything.
They want to decriminalize it. They want open borders. Think of
I've
what
never
many of
heard
these.
a candidate say they want open borders.
Come on.
And I'm having a memory that actually Democrats did approach the president with a DACA proposal and money for the wall, but he didn't accept it.
Yeah, I mean,
things changed.
Yeah, there have been negotiations on both sides. The idea, though, to argue that that all Democrats support open borders is
I didn't
just,
say all.
that Democrats as a brand support open borders it's a really effective talking point, but it's not accurate. Not only is it not accurate, but it's not representative of the politics. If you look at every single border district, they're all represented by Democratic representatives right now, which suggests that if we just talk about the actual border, right, the people who are affected by that and who are more likely to act on that and vote based on immigration issues are shown generally to be people who live farther away from the southern border. The people who live close to the southern border know what border issues are and have always lived there, they also have been voting for Democrats. And so the idea that that this idea of open borders is something that Democrats as a brand want or don't understand about immigration or don't understand about threats that are there. I think that has been an effective talking point, but is inaccurate.
Stephanie, let me ask you: if immigration or healthcare, those two issues, are either of those problematic for the president in 2020 when he takes on an opponent? Because I'm going to give him, as we sit here now, that the economy is probably going to remain strong.
I don't think so, and partly because when we look back at what's hurting us in the economy, it's the entitlements, it's Social Security, Medicare, things like that. One of the things the president has done, I think fairly effectively with his base, is said those things, if we have open borders, if we don't close the border, if we don't have stricter rules on legal, those things are going to just skyrocket. Those obligations are going to, and when we listen to, and I don't want to jump ahead, but when we listen to Democrats talking about the things they want to do for illegal immigrants, then as a Republican, all I can say is, so we already have trouble with health care, now we're going to give it free?
And so what we ought to do now is turn to the Democratic field and see who might be their person. We'll find out when we come back.
CSX moves forward, so do the rest of us.
Dallas, St. Louis, Nashville, Tuscaloosa. All major cities to feel the destruction caused by a direct hit from a tornado. Is Chicago next? It's not a question of if, but when, and the clock is ticking. Learn what to do now at ready.illinois.gov to become Tornado Ready.
We're back on Beyond the Beltway, and we're going to take a look now at the 2020 election, all this conversation about what the Trump presidency has meant. What do Democrats have to offer in 2020? Let me start with the folks who are thinking a lot about the Democrats and who they might offer. Ben Epstein, the progressives in the party, man, they want Bernie Sanders. They want Elizabeth Warren. They don't want the same old, or even normalcy. What are the odds that brings a victory?
Against Trump in November? It's tough to, taking a word from the economist over here that projections can be dangerous, right? Yeah. I think that a more moderate candidate is more appealing to more of America. I mean, I think that's a general rule, but it depends who that candidate is. You need to not only have policies that are interesting, but you need to be a candidate that can excite people, get people out to actually turn out. And so there's a lot going on there. Sanders and Warren, as the progressives in that lane, can do that to certain segments. They have not shown that they can do that across the board to this point, but they both offer some exciting new ideas that are at least new to some people. So,
Phil Beverly, we don't even have to waste time talking about the fact that Joe Biden is the guy that most people think is the moderates that return the country to normal. That's what Democrats say. But what I really want to ask you about are Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar, because they're also fighting for that moderate ground. Do they have a chance against President Trump?
Pete Buttigieg, no, not really. I think he's auditioning for a later sort of main role.
But he's doing well in doing so.
And he is actually doing well. I would say if we look back to 2004, right before John Kerry got in the race, Howard Dean was out in front. Yeah. And then he faded. So at this point in how this is going, again, projections are, I think, a little premature.
Stephanie, any chance of a comeback kid in terms of Cory Booker, Julian Castro, Tulsi Gabbard? I mean, we haven't.
No, I don't see that happening at all. And I think, Ben was sort of hitting it, and that is, you have to be. you can't just be milquetoast. You have to, you have to be able to appeal. I know there are people that are exciting that base, but what's really interesting about this particular primary is that what works to excite the Democrats, and I think we all see this, will not work to excite most of Americans. Middle.
If I can add, or just add on to that though, is that if there's anything that Trump has shown is that you don't have to try to win over everyone.
That's right.
And so
you can win with a minority.
What Trump has done, not only to win with a minority of votes, but Trump's strategy during his campaign and since, and it's been remarkable in my view, is that he has not really tried to speak to new people, but he's done a remarkable job of locking in those people who are for him. And so the idea of governing everyone or trying to win over everyone in the next election, he has not done that much.
I want to come to Mike Miller though, because I want to get all the candidates out. You're our economist, so I wanted to give the money people to you. Andrew Yang, Steyer, Bloomberg, billionaires all.
Oh no, they don't have the common appeal, and the two or three that do are so far, like you said, Stephanie, they're so far to the left, or they've placed themselves so far to the left. I saw what I thought was a pretty fair representation of Elizabeth Warren, for example. Her wealth tax, preposterous idea. The income tax that she's going to raise, the spending she's going to do, what she's going to do with regard to climate and so forth, the cost, not just whether it's good or bad. Bernie Sanders is essentially a socialist. I cannot believe for a second that the United States is going to elect a socialist to be president, especially a man who has essentially done nothing.
There's
no
heart attack.
He's come back. His health is fine on that. Let me. By the way, I want to bring a caller in if I can here. David is calling in from San Francisco. David, I know you want to talk about healthcare and environmental pollution, but if you can tell us how that relates to your thoughts about the 2020 Democratic side, if you would. Hey, David.
Yeah. Well, how are you? It cracks me up. I'd sync it right to the previous discussion where endless money is being spent on the defense of the nation, the military budget. And in fact, under Trump, I think when Obama left, it was at $740 billion. And now it's it's $1.4 trillion. So Trump has basically doubled the national debt in 3 years. So, and we're spending endless amounts of money defending the country with weapons, but we're not helping our citizens escape the poisoning of America through pollution. So if pollution is causing cancers and the healthcare budget is going to be slashed, are they trying to kill us by over-polluting?
The number of deaths caused by the climate is at all-time worldwide lows. We're not polluting ourselves in any way.
Utter lie.
That's not a lie. I'm sorry. Those are the numbers.
Hundreds of thousands are dying already. What happened down in Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico in the last couple of hurricanes?
The number of hurricanes is down. The cyclonic activity in the world is down. Those are not lies. I'm sorry, they're
down,
not lies.
But the intensity of the storms is up.
No, there's fewer Category 3, 4, and 5 have hit the U.S. in the past 5 years than any period in the past 100 years.
This is a globe.
Oh, my gosh.
We
share the same globe here.
You touched on one topic, and that is defense spending. Well,
that's what government does.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say exactly that point. If you ask Americans what the government is for, their number one job is to keep us safe and to
protect us from all adversaries, foreign and domestic.
Keeping us safe from polluters?
But here's the thing about defense spending, though. We're spending on to fight the last war. The next conflict
that could be
to upgrade our military.
That could be the point.
We are also spending money to upgrade a very, very ancient, worn-out military, and that's important too.
Spending money to protect Japan and to protect Germany and to protect
for 18
France
straight years.
Right. And we're
without any
and that
relief.
money is going
Trump
to.
made a very good point.
Trump actually wants to withdraw us from a lot. I would think that'd be something you like.
We
if you
should-
feel like we are bogged down.
We need to talk more about that.
He's been trying to do that.
The good news is we will talk more about this because we have another hour. Those of you watching us on television, this will be a wrap of the show. Those of us who are watching online or listening on your radios, we'll be back for another hour. And we've got lots more to talk about, including international issues. But before we do leave you this hour, I do want to remind you of Bruce's GoFundMe campaign. It covers the cost of satellite delivery of this program in 2020. It's an important thing if you like listening to Beyond the Beltway. You obviously do. That's why you're with us. Go to the GoFundMe page, look up Beyond the Beltway to make your donations. You see it on your screen there. Bruce appreciates everybody who helps out and can give up even just a little bit of money. I know I offered a little bit to try and help.
Welcome to the world, 2116. You can fly across town in minutes or across the globe in under an hour. Whole communities are living on Mars. And solar satellites provide Earth with unlimited clean power. In less than a century, Boeing took the world from seaplanes to space planes, across the universe and beyond. And if you thought that was amazing, you just wait.
Today, fresh fruits and vegetables will go from a field in California to a grocer in Miami. A bottle of beer from Eagle Pass will journey to a restaurant in Manhattan. A 2x4 in Oregon will find its way to a townhome in Denver. A hybrid will say goodbye to Detroit and hello to a showroom in Austin. While a steel beam will leave a mill in Illinois for a high-rise in Phoenix. And a flat screen in China will head to an electronics store in Memphis. Because today, as every day, wherever you find business, you'll find us.